Welcome back to the Information Week News Desk, coming to you live from Interop Las Vegas. I'm Sarah Peters. Now, I would like to bring up one of my favorite people, my colleague and my friend, Curt Franklin. Curt is a technical editor on Information Week and also helps bring the Interop Net to life, helps the Interop team with it for years now. Curt, welcome. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Sarah.
Now, like I said, you are one of the builders, the founders, the makers of the Interop Net, but you also at Information Week cover many things, but certainly the Internet of Things. So let's start there. What's most exciting to you in the Internet of Things right now?
Well, you know, when we use the phrase Internet of Things, it's a huge umbrella term. And one of the things that is exciting to me is that we're starting to see a clear division. On the one side, you have the consumer Internet of Things. That's all the home control stuff, the health stuff, the wearables, things like that. And that's a very pleasant market, wonderful, but not really what we do at Information Week or here at Interop. The part that's more exciting to me is what some people are calling the industrial Internet of Things. And that's where people are putting more and more sensors and controllers on industrial processes so that you're able to get things like predictive maintenance of assembly lines, predictive maintenance of vehicles, finer control of the processes and vehicles, and to really get exciting, advanced analytics about the information coming back from all of those sensors out there on the industrial and enterprise devices. So to me, that's exciting for a couple of reasons. One is that it really is involving the entire enterprise IT chain, from the devices out on the edge, through the networks, all the way back to the big analytics engine sitting at the core of the enterprise. The other is that companies are seeing genuine hard dollar returns on all of this. So that's providing the money to make investments in improving the technology. So we're really seeing the industrial Internet of Things growing, developing, and maturing at a much faster pace than the consumer Internet of Things is at this point.
That is exciting because so many people still think of the Internet of Things as just Fitbits.
Right.
And it's progressed so much further than that. And now, you know, I come from the security end of things. So we are constantly thinking about all of the ways that this stuff can be ruined.
Right.
How all the privacy concerns and all the security concerns and how all of our new navigation systems in our cars can be hacked and kill us and all of that. From what you're seeing, are those kinds of concerns slowing the advancement at all? Or is the pace of innovation just so fast and furious at this point that it's going gangbusters and nothing is really going to slow it down?
I think it's a little bit of both, because on the one hand, the pace of advancement is quite high. These things are going gangbusters, companies are adopting them. On the other hand, I have to believe that pace would be even faster if there weren't some very legitimate concerns about security out there. Now, the good news is that the vendors, the manufacturers, the designers recognize that these legitimate security issues exist. And so they're beginning to deal with them. You're starting to see sensor units, you're starting to see controller units that have encryption and authentication built in, so that as those devices communicate over the network, they're doing so in a secure fashion. It's really interesting because for decades, industrial control networks were pretty wide open as it was, even before the Internet of Things came along, because there were still a lot of people who just couldn't believe that a hacker would want to get into the control system for their assembly line. Over the past decade, we've had some very high-profile examples of attacks against those industrial networks. So people do see that those issues exist, and both the corporate IT people and the vendors who supply them are responding. Perhaps not as fast as we would like them to, but they are responding. So we're seeing those security concerns begin to diminish again on the industrial Internet of Things.
Yeah, definitely the home security industry, we have noticed, is not doing a very good job of its own security.
True enough.
Which is a concern. Now, with the Interop net, has the Internet of Things stuff, I mean, has IoT changed the way that you guys are thinking about Interop net at all?
Well, there are a couple of things going on. One of the issues that has been there with the operational Interop net, the network that all of the vendors here and all of the attendees use, is that each attendee now, statistically, brings with them their own little fleet of devices. So all of those devices, ranging from their Fitbits to their phones to their tablets to everything else they're carrying, all want their very own address and internet connection. So that has dramatically increased the number of transactions, the number of connections happening on the network. More interesting, though, is that this year, out on the show floor, there is the Interop Net Lab that has a simulated international Internet of Things application being demonstrated. People can go by, see what's happening, see what happens to the application when the communications links are degraded in various real-world ways, and see just how easy it is to build Internet of Things applications, both with currently available programming tools and without involving much programming at all. There's some great demonstrations going on. There are people there to answer questions, and that's the kind of thing I really think all attendees should make their way over there and take a look at that and play with it. I mean, you can do things like inject your own network degradation to see what that does to the network. It's
that sounds like fun. It does actually sound like fun.
It really is a lot of fun. It really is. You can
in a lab setting. It sounds like great fun.
That's right.
At home, it doesn't sound like all that much fun.
Yeah, when you have actual revenue-producing users who are depending on it, then network degradation is no laughing matter. But when you're sitting there having fun, it can be a ton of chuckles just to sit there and see what happens when you throw delays, when you play with the number of drop packets, all kinds of interesting stuff.
Interesting. I'm really glad that they have the Interop Lab. Now, as you well know, Interop is celebrating 30 years this year, and you have been in the industry for quite a while. We have worked together for quite a while, and we have just in the time that we've worked together, which has been about 5-6 years now?
About 6 years now.
We've seen so much change just in that period of time. From what you've seen in the past 30 years, what do you think is your most exciting? What was the most exciting, the most miserable, the most boring, or the most overly hyped stuff that you've seen come through IT?
You ask about...
And I'm not saying you're old, Curt. I'm just saying you have a lot of opinions.
I appreciate that.
Because you're not.
One of the things that is both the most exciting and in some ways the most boring is the fact that today we take interoperability of networks for granted. And when this show started 30 years ago, that was really the reason for Interop, so that the engineers could come together and see if their equipment would work together. Because you couldn't take for granted that equipment from 3Com could successfully pass packets to equipment from Cisco. Uh, there were standards, but they were being adhered to in some very creative ways. And what we've seen over the years is that basic IP connectivity works. The network happens and it works, and that's the best thing. That is whole vast levels of uncertainty that are gone from the day-to-day life of network engineers. In terms of the most hyped, I have to say that it has taken a great long while for wireless speeds to reach the point that we thought they should. And that's because what we have in the computer industry is a lot of very skilled digital engineers. When you start going out over the air, you enter the world of analog. And you have to have very skilled analog engineers. In the past 30 or 40 years, digital engineers have become far more commonly available in the talent marketplace than have really top-notch analog engineers. So having the companies get the analog engineers to make the RF stuff work beautifully and get the new RF protocols, the new RF standards in place has taken longer than I believe a lot of people would have liked. But it's happening. And so I think in coming years, what we're going to see is not just ubiquitous networking, but ubiquitous instant networking. There are a lot of the issues at the application layer today where we look at latency, the time between when you ask for something and when it appears to you as a user. That concept of latency is going to go away. It will be
That would be nice.
essentially instant from a human standpoint. And between that and a lot of the machine learning things that are going on, tying machine learning back into the Internet of Things, where our intelligent machines are having control access to the devices around us. I suspect that in 5 years we're going to be seeing applications that we can barely dream of today.
All right, but you are a dreamer. You are a creative and beautiful soul. And if you could have some machine, if you could create some artificial intelligent Internet of Things piece of technology today that would change your life, what would that be? Because I know that you've thought about this. I'm not just throwing this question at you.
And I have to admit that what I'm looking for is the computer from Star Trek.
There are a lot of computers in Star Trek. Which one?
The one that Scotty picked up his, goes and talks to at his engineering desk.
That's a good pick.
But that in a device that is essentially invisible to me, so that an earwig is the only physical manifestation I need, and the computer and I can talk to each other. I can get it to answer my questions. I can get it to remind me of things, and I really don't think that's terribly far-fetched. That's coming. And so I'm excited by that. I think I still have enough years left that I'm going to get to see some really exciting things out there, and the human-machine partnership is going to bring us into some really fascinating new areas.
I see more of that relationship between me and Jarvis from Iron Man. That's kind of more the connection that I'm interested in. But yeah, as long as long as they have that kind of a charming accent, I think we'd get along just fine. Curt, it's been a pleasure having you here. I always love every conversation that we have.
Sarah, thank you for having me here. It's part of Interop that I truly enjoy.
Yay. Curt Franklin, Information Week. Always a pleasure to have him. And don't you go anywhere. There will be more from the news desk coming your way after the break.